Sony's sudden retreat from PC gaming has absolutely nothing to do with bad sales. In fact, by most accounts, their PC games have been a huge success. The real story is that Sony is terrified of something much, much, much bigger. The very real threat that Steam and maybe even the Nintendo Switch 2 could tear down their entire console empire. You heard that right. And their next move basically proves it. Let's get one thing straight. If you've been on the internet in early March 2026, which, I mean, come on, you've probably lived there now, you've seen the headlines, probably sparked by a bombshell Bloomer report. The story going around is that Sony is killing its PC gaming strategy. But here's what the headlines miss. This isn't a rage quit. Sony isn't flipping the table and storming out of the room angry. This is a calculated strategic retreat. It's a pivot, not a panic. If you look closer, a more interesting picture starts to form. According to those reports, this new strategy is laser focused on their big single-player first-party games, the absolute crown jewels of the PlayStation brand. The proof that Sony isn't abandoning PC entirely is staring us right in the face. Live service games aren't just safe, they're blowing up because of the opposite strategy. Okay? Just look at the insane success of Helldivers 2, a game that launched on PS5 and PC at the same time and became a global phenomenon, selling millions on Steam alone. It tells you this isn't about some sudden hatred for the PC. This is a targeted, almost surgical decision. They are drawing a line in the sand between two kinds of games, the one that you get to play with your friends and the ones that get you to buy a PlayStation. Solid. And it's always been the single-player epics, the God of Wars, the Spider-Mans, the Last of Us, the upcoming Wolverine game. That sells consoles. To understand why they're being locked back in the vault, you have to look past the easy answers and dig into the much deeper fear that's quietly taken hold at PlayStation headquarters. The simple story, and the easiest one to believe, is that Sony is backing out because their PC ports were financial flop. That they went to all this effort and PC players just didn't care. But the data doesn't really back that up now. That's it. We need to be clear here. Were the sales a bit inconsistent? Sure. Did they see fewer PC players jumping on sequels that were released closer to the console launch? Absolutely. It's just common sense that staggered releases will capture a smaller slice of the PC audience compared to a massive day one launch. Okay? But don't mistake a smaller than hoped for slice of the pie for a disaster. The early ports were incredibly profitable. Horizon Zero Dawn sold very well on PC. God of War also sold very well on PC. Even with a decline in market share, we're talking about huge revenue that for a while Sony saw as icing on the cake. This was a strategy born from a simple idea. Meet gamers where they are, grow the brand, and make more money from these amazing games long after their launch hype died down. Simple enough, right? If the games were still making money, why stop? Why turn off a revenue faucet? Because the debate inside Sony was never just about sales numbers. A faction within the company was apparently being worried for years that putting their biggest hits on PC was like a slow-acting poison, weakening the PlayStation brand and chipping away at the very reason to own the console. They were afraid it was teaching gamers they could just wait. And that right there is the key. This retreat isn't a reaction to bad sales. It's a proactive defensive move against a much bigger threat. The money from PC ports, while nice, has been deemed insignificant compared to the long-term risk to their entire business model. PC sales are just a small fraction of their gaming division's total income. It's a drop in the ocean. And Sony seems to have decided that this drop isn't worth risking the whole ship for, especially when you see the pirates on the horizon, sailing under the flag of Steam. To really get Sony's fear, you have to understand their business. Sony doesn't make most of its money when you buy a PlayStation 5. In fact, early in a console's life, they often lose money on the hardware. The real money, the engine that runs the whole PlayStation empire, it's the walled garden. It's the PlayStation Store. When you buy a PlayStation, you enter their kingdom, right? And inside those walls, Sony is king. They're the tax collector. Every digital game you buy, every piece of DLC, every microtransaction, Sony takes a 30% cut. It's a river of gold flowing straight to them. They get 30% from their own games and they get 30% from everybody else's games too. It's one of the most powerful business models in entertainment history. Now, compare that to a PC sale. When Sony sells a copy of God of War on Steam, who gets that 30%? Not Sony. Valve does. Sony just gets the publisher's share. Right away, the profit is way lower. But let's add another layer. For a game like Marvel's Spider-Man, on top of Valve's 30% cut, Sony also has to pay a hefty royalty fee to Marvel. Suddenly, that $70 sale on Steam is slashed by a huge amount before Sony sees a penny. But when they sell that game, that PlayStation game on the PlayStation Store, they get their own 30% cut plus the publisher's share. The difference is astronomical. Every PC sale isn't just less profitable, it's a customer's living outside of Sony's kingdom. It's a lost opportunity to keep that player in their ecosystem for years, selling them subscriptions, DLC, and a dozen more games, all while taking that sweet 30% cut. For years, this was fine. The PC was its own thing, but that's changing. The walls between PC and console are starting to crumble. The Steam Deck is probably the most disruptive piece of gaming hardware in a decade. It's not just a handheld, it's a proof of concept that a PC-based console can be sleek, user-friendly, and incredibly popular. It made good on the original promise of the Steam machine, putting a gigantic library of cheap PC games into a console-like device. And for Sony, that should be absolutely terrifying. The Steam Deck is a blueprint for their worst nightmare, a real open platform competitor that sits in the living room hooked up to the TV, or a more powerful docked Steam Deck, priced to compete with a future PlayStation 6. This thing would offer everything Sony's walled garden is designed to prevent: access to Steam's legendary sales, the ability to use other stores like Epic or GOG, true ownership of your games, no 30% tax for Sony. It's quite literally a direct assault on their business model. The deck proved there's a massive appetite for this. Sony isn't just competing with a handheld anymore, they're competing with an idea. The idea of an open, consumer-friendly console. In that light, pulling their single-player games from PC isn't just about protecting PS5 sales now. It's a desperate move to starve a future competitor of its most valuable weapon. They're trying to make sure that when Valve eventually makes a serious play for the living room, the one thing you can't get on their box is the next God of War or Marvel's Wolverine. But this isn't just a one-front war. As Sony looks out the approaching threat from Valve, they see two other armies getting ready to attack. For years, the console war was simple: PlayStation versus Xbox. Now, Sony is facing a terrifying pincer movement from both Microsoft and Nintendo, and it's forcing them back to their strongest defense: exclusivity. Let me start with Microsoft. Xbox strategy has been obvious for a while now: break down the walls. Game Pass, cloud gaming, day one PC releases, it's all designed to make the ecosystem about the player, not the box. But their next move is a real Trojan horse. Overwhelming reports suggest the next Xbox will be a fundamental shift. The rumor is that it's basically a Windows-based PC that boots into a friendly Xbox interface. Just think about what that means. If the next Xbox can play PC games and can potentially access Steam, what happens to Sony's PC ports? Suddenly, God of War Ragnarok and The Last of Us Part 1 could be playable on their direct competitors' hardware. Sony would literally be developing games for the next Xbox. It's a strategic checkmate. It makes putting their exclusives on PC a massive liability. The only logical countermove is to take their games off the PC board entirely. This isn't a choice, it's a forced move. And then you have Nintendo. For 2 generations, PlayStation has lived comfortably alongside the Switch. They were in different lanes. The Switch was for Nintendo's masterpieces and cool indies, while PlayStation was the powerhouse for huge, graphically intense blockbusters the Switch simply couldn't run. That clear separation is about to end. With new chips and tech like Nvidia's DLSS, it will be powerful enough to run modern AAA games. Imagine a world where the next Assassin's Creed runs great on the Switch 2 from day one. That critical advantage PlayStation had, being the best place to play big third-party games, starts to fade away. When that happens, what makes a PlayStation special? What's the core reason to buy a PS6? The only answer is there's first party exclusives. In a world where the Switch 2 can play the big third party hits and the next Xbox can't play PC games, Sony's own studios are their last line of defense. They're the only thing that is truly, undeniably PlayStation. Protecting them isn't just a good idea, it's their only way of survival. So, Sony is building its walls higher and preparing for a siege. What does this mean for you, the person who just wants to play games? Well, if you're a PC only gamer, the news is bad. It's not looking good for you. Sorry. Golden age of playing PlayStation's best games a year or two later is probably over. The wait time between console and PC launch is likely going to get much, much longer. Sony's choosing to exclude you, hoping you'll eventually break down and buy a PlayStation. It's a return to the old way of doing things. But if you own a PlayStation, or you're thinking about it, this is a very different story for you. For you, this is a promise. It's Sony declaring that they are doubling down on what made the PS4 so dominant, a non-stop focus on incredible high-quality single-player exclusives. This move signals that they're reinvesting in their core strength. It's Sony telling you that your investment in their box will be rewarded with games you can't play anywhere else. They're trying to justify the price of a PS5 and eventually a PS6 by making its library something you just can't miss. I'm already hearing Uncharted beauties coming along. This is the console war kicking off all over again. On one side, you have Microsoft's vision of an open future where games are everywhere. On the other, you have Sony and Nintendo too, betting everything on the power of their walled gardens and the appeal of exclusivity. Sony's drawing a line in the sand, pulling back to its fortress and daring everyone else to come at them. But what do you think? Is this a brilliant move by Sony to protect their empire, or is it an arrogant, anti-consumer decision that's going to eventually backfire? Let me know what you think down in the comments. Would love to read what you think. And if you like these deep dives into the business of gaming, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Why don't you? Looking good. And ring that bell so you don't miss the next one. And of course, liking the video is always a massive help. Thanks for that. You are truly a superstar of a gamer. I will catch you on the next one.